What if the Roman Empire never fell? What if the greatest civilization in human history just kept going? Today, we find out exactly what that world would look like and whether it would actually be better. It is the year 476 AD. A Germanic chieftain named Odoacer walks into the throne room in Ravenna, taps the last Roman emperor on the shoulder, and says, essentially, "You're done." Romulus Augustulus, and yes, that really was his name, hands over his crown. No dramatic battle, no burning city, just an awkward Tuesday afternoon that ended Western civilization as the ancient world knew it. But what if that Tuesday never happened? What if the Roman Empire held? What if the legions kept marching, the aqueducts kept flowing, and Rome never fell? Buckle up, because this rabbit hole goes very, very deep. First, let's understand why Rome actually collapsed. Because it wasn't just barbarians at the gate. The empire had been slowly unraveling for over a century. Overextended borders, crushing taxation, political instability so severe that in one 50-year stretch, Rome cycled through over 20 emperors, most of whom died violently. The economy was hollowed out. Inflation ran rampant. The military had become so dependent on Germanic mercenaries that the line between Roman soldier and the guy we're supposed to be defending against had basically disappeared. So for Rome to survive, something has to change. Let's say, in our timeline, a competent emperor takes the throne around 350 AD and actually fixes the structural problems. Tax reform, military restructuring, a genuine power-sharing arrangement with the Germanic tribes that integrates them as citizens rather than threats. Rome stabilizes. The western provinces hold, and history takes a very different road. The first and most enormous consequence is that the Dark Ages simply do not happen. In our timeline, when Rome fell, literacy rates across Western Europe collapsed. Trade networks disintegrated. Cities shrank. The sophisticated Roman legal system, which underpinned everything from property rights to contracts, fractured into hundreds of local customs and feudal arrangements. Europe essentially hit Control Z on 500 years of institutional knowledge. In a world where Rome survives, none of that happens. The Roman road network, over 77,000 kilometers of paved roads, stays maintained. Goods keep moving. Ideas keep spreading. The administrative machinery that connected Britain to Egypt to Mesopotamia keeps functioning. And here is where things get genuinely strange. Without the fragmentation of Europe into competing kingdoms, the feudal system probably never emerges in the form we know it. No feudalism means the entire social architecture of medieval Europe. Lords, serfs, knights, castles looks radically different. Or possibly doesn't exist at all. The Roman economy was, for its time, remarkably sophisticated. It had banking, insurance, long-distance trade in luxury goods, and a relatively mobile labor force. A surviving Rome likely accelerates those institutions rather than losing them for 1,000 years. Which raises a truly dizzying question. Does the Industrial Revolution happen 800 years earlier? Maybe not. Roman society had a deep dependency on slave labor, which historically suppressed the incentive to develop labor-saving machinery. But a Rome that survived would have eventually confronted the same pressures that drove medieval and early modern Europe toward mechanization. Perhaps by 900 AD, the Roman equivalent of a steam engine chugs to life somewhere in northern Italy. Now let's talk about religion, because this is where the alternate timeline gets genuinely complicated. In our world, the collapse of Roman political authority created a power vacuum that the Christian church rushed to fill. The Pope became not just a spiritual leader, but a political force, mediating between kings, launching crusades, and shaping the entire trajectory of Western thought for a millennium. In a surviving Rome, Christianity still spreads. It was already the official religion of the empire by the time of Constantine in the 300s. But without the political vacuum, the church never accumulates the same temporal power. It remains primarily a spiritual institution rather than a political one, which means no Holy Roman Empire, no papal states, no crusades, at least not in the form we know them. The relationship between Islam and the Christian West, which was defined for centuries by conflict over land that Rome once controlled, plays out entirely differently. Speaking of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad is born in the year 570 AD. In our timeline, the rapid Islamic expansion of the 600s was partly fueled by the weakness of the Byzantine and Persian empires, both exhausted by decades of war with each other. A healthy Roman Empire is not exhausted. It is the dominant military power on earth. The Islamic expansion, one of the most consequential events in all of human history, might be contained, redirected, or forced into a very different geographic shape. We are now looking at a world map that is almost unrecognizable. Let's fast forward to roughly the year 1000 AD in our alternate timeline. The Roman Empire still exists. It has evolved, as all institutions do, but the core administrative and legal framework persists. Latin remains the lingua franca of governance and scholarship across Europe and the Mediterranean. The concept of Roman citizenship, which was extended to virtually all free inhabitants of the empire back in 212 AD, has had 700 more years to deepen into something like a genuine multicultural identity. Is this a democracy? Almost certainly not in any modern sense. Rome never was, but it may have evolved toward something: a more representative Senate, regional assemblies, a formalized system of rights, simply because large, complex, literate societies tend to develop those pressures over time. Here is something fascinating. Without the nation-state system that emerged from medieval Europe's fragmentation, the very concept of nationalism, the idea that your primary loyalty is to an ethnically or linguistically defined country, may never fully develop. No France, no Germany, no England as we know them. Instead, provinces, regions, a patchwork of local cultures held together by Roman law, Roman infrastructure, and Roman identity. The Americas get discovered, probably still around the same era, because sailing technology follows its own logic. But they are discovered by Roman explorers sailing under a unified Mediterranean empire, rather than by competing Spanish and Portuguese crowns racing to claim territory for their kings. The colonization of the New World looks nothing like what actually happened. And now for the question underneath the question. Would this alternate world be better? It is tempting to say yes. No Dark Ages. No Black Death spreading through a fragmented, under-resourced Europe. No Crusades. Possibly no World War I or II, since those conflicts were deeply rooted in the nation-state competition that Rome's survival might have prevented. But Rome was not a utopia. It was a slave economy of staggering brutality. It was an authoritarian state that executed people for political inconvenience and staged mass killings as public entertainment. A Roman Empire that survived intact carries all of that with it. The very competition between European nation-states that caused so much war also drove an extraordinary explosion of innovation. The Renaissance, the Scientific Revolution, the Enlightenment, all of these were partly products of a fragmented, competitive Europe where ideas could escape persecution in one kingdom by moving to the next. A unified Rome might be stable, and stability at civilizational scale can sometimes be the enemy of the radical new idea. So here's the honest answer. A world where Rome never fell would probably be more advanced technologically by the year 1000, and possibly more dangerous by the year 2000, because the ideas of individual liberty, national self-determination, and human rights that we now take for granted grew largely in the cracks of Rome's ruins. Sometimes The thing that breaks you is also the thing that builds what comes next. Rome fell, and the world that rose from the rubble, messy, fractured, constantly at war with itself, eventually produced the concept that power should answer to the people, which is perhaps the most Roman idea of all. If you made it this far, you clearly love asking the big questions. So hit subscribe, because next week, we ask another one. And if you're wondering what happens when another empire makes the wrong call at exactly the wrong moment, well, that video is already waiting for you. See you in the next What If.